Thanks a lot for coming. I'm Gavin. I will be your storyteller tonight. I'm really happy to be here at Plant People event. Basically, this will be my first public storytelling event for about 4 years, and for the 5 or 6 years previous to that, it was like my full-time thing. And that's basically because I went traveling for a couple of years, and then I was really sick for a couple of years. And something that really helped me a lot in the last 6 months is plant medicine. I was at the Learning Clan Festival over New Year's, and I was just sitting around, and I heard my friend Amit, who's here with us tonight, having a conversation with a woman who's in Joburg called Ilana, who's involved with Plant People, or started the whole Facebook thing, I believe. And I overheard their conversation and got involved, and through that found my way into plant medicine, which has really helped me. So I wanted to make my little comeback show here tonight. And usually I start with this drum. It's just a nice way of centering myself in the audience. This is called a tar, or mendir, or bowron, or daf, depending on where it comes from, but generically a frame drum. So it's just a quite wide and shallow drum with one skin. And I'm going to use some North African, Middle Eastern, and Indian techniques to get a few sounds going. Story is like the water you heat for your bath. It takes messages between the fire and your skin. It lets them meet and it cleans you. Very few are able to sit in the fire itself like a salamander or Abraham. We need intermediaries. A feeling of fullness comes, but usually it takes some bread to bring it. We're surrounded by beauty, but usually we need to be walking inside a garden to know it. The body itself is a screen that shields and partially reveals the light that's blazing inside your presence. Stories, water, the body, all these things we do are mediums that hide and then show what's hidden. Study them well, and enjoy being washed in the secret that we sometimes know and then not. So the title of this show came from a few years back. So talking about plants and medicine and healing, something I used to do a lot of that I'm glad I don't do anymore is smoke cigarettes. I used to smoke a lot of cigarettes. I started smoking when I was 11, and 30 years later, so that's about 3 years ago, I found myself spending some time near a town called Vilcabamba in Ecuador. I was staying with Seattle Steve, who was a Qigong teacher and had a little piece of land up in the mountains there. So we were like, me and another guy, Ryan, who was a Fijian guy, we were working Steve's vegetable patch, and in return he was letting us stay on his land and teaching us Qigong. And I decided it was time to really give some serious consideration to stopping smoking, because I was smoking probably like 30 a day by then. So one day, Steve told us that there was some really beautiful San Pedro cacti growing down the road. So we got into his ancient Land Rover and off we went, and he harvested some San Pedro, and then we went back to his car. So those of you who've worked with some medicines before, you'll know that the lessons and the effects can sometimes kick in before the thing is in the body. So we're like, we're driving back, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm sort of dozing off there, and suddenly there's this voice, "Don't go to sleep." I was like, "No, man, I'm tired, let me sleep." And the voice says, no, don't go to sleep. And then like in front of me appears, of all things, of all people, Tony the Tiger, like the guy from Kellogg's. And so Tony says to me, "You've got to quit smoking cigarettes, it's about time." So I start arguing with Tony, and my mind is coming up with every possible rationalization that there is for giving up smoking. But every time I come up with an excuse, this big cigarette appears in front of me, and then Tony kind of swats it with his paw. The cigarette explodes into a million pieces, and then this blackboard comes down in front, a piece of chalk puts a tick on it, and then this kind of weird voice, it's a female voice, goes, "Escape route checked." So yeah, I probably didn't need to take anything, but it was all happening already. So we got back to Steve's place, and I went to I was staying in a little wooden A-frame there, and I gathered up everything. I used to smoke tobacco, so I got like all my cigarette papers, my lighters, the whole thing. I gathered it up, and I gave it to my friend who was there. I said, "Right, that's like all yours. I'm done with cigarettes." And then that night, or probably the next night, actually thinking about it, we cooked up the medicine, and we were outside Ryan's hut, and I drank some. It was my first time. He was more experienced with it, and then he drank like about twice as much as me. He was quite a big guy as well, and we started experiencing the medicine, and then I started talking to Ryan. He goes, "No, I'm going to do this Vipassana style, so you can't talk to me." And I was like, I wasn't into all this stuff so much then, so I was like, okay, this is going to be super boring. But fortunately, I had the dogs. There were 4 dogs, 4 neurotic German shepherds who had what could only be described as a stick fetish, even for dogs. And it was a full moon, and we were like 2,500 meters up, and I'm not sure how much difference that makes when you're like that many miles away from the moon, but I do know it was like super bright. You could like read a book by the moonlight. So I spent like the next few hours kind of running up and down these mountain trails, throwing sticks for the dogs, and generally kind of having a really interesting time. And then like some of the uncomfortable feelings started coming up. I was like, oh, I'm going to have a cigarette actually, fine. So like, so like I saw Ryan like had his tobacco and stuff there by the fire, so I like made myself a little rolly, and like I took a couple of drags, and it was just like horrible. It just tasted foul, and it felt like I was inhaling splinters. So that was it. I put it out, and then I hadn't smoked for a couple of days. We went to town, and I smelled someone having a cigarette, and I was just like, but like I overcame that by pure kind of willpower and probably mean this to myself and all the things you're not supposed to do if you're spiritual. But anyway, so we get back to Steve's place, and I decide to take a walk from the gate off the road because there's a few little farms on the way. It's like an hour or two's walk, and I get back, and there's a lady then, I can't remember her name, but she was really nice, and she was from Israel, and she used to come and help Steve with cooking and stuff once or twice a week while we were there, because Steve's wife, who's Svetlana, who I never met, who was a Russian raw food chef, was away at the time. So she looks at me and she says, "What's up?" So I said, "No, I just had a walk to celebrate giving up smoking. I just walked a couple of days." She looks at me and it's like a very Israeli way of saying things, I think. And she goes like, "Those who walk into the battle should not talk like those who have come back and are taking their clothes off." So I was like, okay. But anyway, that was 3 years ago, and I haven't touched one drag of a cigarette since then, so I think I've earned the right to get undressed. And that poem that I started with is called Story Water, and that is a Coleman Barks translation of the Afghan poet Jalal al-Din Rumi. So, yeah, thanks to Coleman for the translation. And now I'm going to tell you a story that comes, I don't know exactly where from, because I heard another storyteller tell it, and he said that the story was from West Africa. Didn't say where, but as best as I can remember it. And the story is called "A Blind Man Catches a Bird." Once there lived a blind man. He was also very wise. He lived in a small village with his sister. And many people would come to him with questions, and he always seemed to have a helpful answer. And when people asked him how it was that he could be both blind and wise, he'd always reply, "That is because I see with my ears." So time went on, and the blind man's sister married a hunter who came to live with them in their village. Now one night, everyone was sitting around the fire. The blind man spoke to the hunter and he said, "My brother, tomorrow when you go hunting, please let me come with you." "Come with me? No, what can a blind man do? You just get in my way. It's better you stay here in the village and do what you're good at." But every night, the hunter would repeat his question, "Please, my brother, tomorrow, let me come with you." Now one night, the hunter was in a really good mood, so he said, "Okay, tomorrow you can come with me, but you must be very quiet and you must do exactly what I tell you at all times." And the blind man agreed. So early the next morning, they woke up and they start to head out on a path into the jungle. They were walking. The hunter ahead, the blind man with his hand on the hunter's shoulder. And they were walking when "Shh," said the blind man. "What is it?" "There are elephants ahead of us. But it's okay, they're playing in a waterhole, they're drinking, they're having fun, they will not trouble us," went the hunter. But they walked on, and sure enough, a few minutes later, it was just as the blind man had said. They carried on walking, and they walked for a while, and then "Shh, there are a lion ahead of us, but they're eating a buck. They will not hurt us, we're okay." And sure enough, a few minutes later, it was just as the blind man had said. And they walked on until they reached a clearing in the middle of the forest. The hunter took from his bag 2 bird traps. He set one up. And then the blind man asked if he might have a go setting the second one up. and with the help of the hunter he did so. They returned home for the night. The next morning they woke up early again and set out on the path into the jungle. They walked and they walked. This time the blind man had remembered every turn, every twist, every rock, every root along the way, and he had no need to have his hand on his brother's shoulder. So they walked until they reached the clearing. Now, in the trap that the hunter had set, there was a very small, ordinary-looking grey bird. But in the trap the blind man had set, there was a beautiful, large bird with feathers of gold, blue, yellow, crimson. The hunter thought to himself, those feathers, those would make a beautiful present for my wife. So he took the grey bird from the trap that the hunter had set, the blind man had set, and gave it to him and said, this is the bird you have caught. The blind man took it. Without a word, he felt it a couple of times and put it into his bag. Then the hunter took a colourful bird for himself. He took down the traps and they began to walk back towards the village. And as they were walking, the hunter turned and said, if you are so wise, tell me this. Why is it that there's so much war, so much hate, so much misery in this world? The blind man replied, well, there are many reasons, my brother, but perhaps one is because there are men like you who take what does not belong to them. The hunter, he felt so ashamed, he didn't know what to say, and eventually he just swapped the birds back and apologized. And they carried on walking. And the blind man put his hand on his shoulder in a gesture of friendship. They carried on walking, and the hunter said to him, why is it, my brother, that there's also so much joy, so much happiness, so much friendship and love in this world? And the blind man replied, one reason for this surely is that there are men like you, my brother, who, when they have done wrong, are prepared to say so and apologize. And from that day on, whenever it was that anyone would ask how it was that that blind man was so wise, the hunter would reply, that is because he sees with his ears and he listens with his heart. So, a few years ago I did an album which was called Of Beasts and Kings, Skins and Strings, and there's like some stories. I took some traditional stories from around the world and rewrote them as poems, and then wrote some songs around it and recorded that. And I was lucky to work with some wonderful musicians based in Cape Town at the time. A couple of jazz guys, Reza Kota, and who was also a classical musician, and Kyle Shepard, and then a viola player called Natalie Mason, who was over from England at the time. So one of the stories is a Russian story that I rewrote in rhyme form, and it's called The Gypsy and the Wolf. So I'll leave it to you to decide the medicine of each of these stories as we go along. I think the last one is kind of like, sometimes medicine can taste a little bit bitter for a moment, but it's good for us. So this story is Gypsy and the Wolf. A cold, cruel winter's icy wind whistled and whipped through skeleton trees. A pack of wolves sought shelter against that wind blown of icy seas. In a cave, in a forest, in a far-flung frozen land, a bastard winter that tested the mettle of both beast and man. Inside that cave, the wolves, they rested. That very day, their skills tested in a long, hard hunt and in closing in for the kill. Now that pack's sly old leader, she had gone the hunt's full length, yet slowed by cycles of season, she relied more on wit and courage than on strength. And even as she'd sunk her fangs into her chosen prey, she knew from the pack's contemptuous glares that soon would come the day when nature would take its course and younger fangs, younger force would rip her apart, gut and heart. This had always been the way. And so, on that same night, under the shadow of a pale waning moon's light. She left the cave, she left the pack. She walked away, not looking back. She walked away from all that she knew, head held high into the new. She walked away from the life she had known, heart full of courage. She walked on alone. Moving, silent and steady along, the pounding of her heart a song. Through the forest the she-wolf crept towards that old house where the gypsy man slept. Now the gypsy man too, he'd been a leader of his kind, yet slowly, as his years numbered many and blindness painted blue across his pupils black, he knew the time had come to turn his back. Remembering trials and times of great joy, he'd walked those trails since barely a boy, through famine, funeral, fires and feasts, fights with other men, battles with beasts. Memories flickered like flames across his mind, across his heart, and he knew the time had come for their ways to part. So one late winter's morning, as he and his men were travelling through the woods, singing songs and carrying their drums and their guns, a blizzard came. He saw his chance to disappear inside that devil's dance. He turned away, he let them go, their thinking claimed by the cold and the snow. He walked away from all he knew, head held high into the new. He walked away from the life he had known, heart full of courage. He walked on alone, that old abandoned house made of wood and stone. The she-wolf followed her nose, not once looking back, but the wind changed course and blew her scent to the slowly stirring pack. Out of the forest, stepping across the windswept snowy plains, the she-wolf swiftly stepped across the short cold distance that remained, her shadow skinny underneath that moon so thin and pale. As she neared the gypsy man's house, the pack was on her trail. Down between stepping two rows of winter-bare trees, the she-wolf did go, feeling the pain in her aging legs, paws padding over powdery snow. Now the gypsy and the wolves, their paths they had crossed before, but she had forbidden her pack to attack, as if in some unspoken pact. So when he heard the howling of the she-wolf outside his door, he was not afraid. As he stepped outside, shining his lantern to see more. He saw the she-wolf behind her, the pack, fangs bared, snarling, ready to attack, blood on their mind and in their eyes. Yet, fearing flame and lacking a leader wise, the wolves lost their courage to attack and slowly slunk back. The she-wolf, she remained on the gypsy's porch. She looked into the old man's eyes. For a long moment they beheld each other, both old, both wounded, both wise. And as the seasons rolled around, with summer song and winter's retreat, you'd find that old gypsy man puffing on his pipe and the wolf curled up at his feet. Thank you. So, another way of medicine and healing and such things, and those who talk of these concepts or realities as they may be, is the whole thing about let's be in the now. And I'm never sure we can really be anywhere else, but I'd like to do something a bit more together that is going to be really in the now. So sometimes I just make up stories as we go along. So I'm going to need a little bit of help from you guys. So the first thing that I would like is if you can help me out with a couple of objects that are going to feature. So you can actually give me a physical object if you have something, or you can just like suggest something. So a few things.
Stars.
Stars.
Ukulele.
Stars and a ukulele.
Orange.
Stars, ukulele and orange. Thank you for the only non-rhyming word in the English language.
And a panda.
A
A panda.
panda. Can I borrow said panda. Oh, that's so cute. So we have stars, a ukulele, orange, and a panda. Okay, and then we need a couple of characters. I suppose the panda could be a character or an object or both. But let's have another couple of characters for our story. Any ideas?
A dragon.
A dragon.
A shaman.
A dragon and a shaman. Something else that kind of preferably doesn't even seem like it fits in.
A snow owl.
A snow owl, a dragon and a shaman. That's still quite mystical in a way. Maybe we could have one more if anyone has one, but yeah, we'll go with those. And
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. And we have he's very mystical in his own. And we have a torch. It says like RMA. Does that stand for anything in particular?
It's a company, Rand Mutual Assurance.
Very important. Rest mutually assured. Okay, so normally so let me just recap quickly. So we've got a snow owl, a shaman, Donald Trump, and a panda. Did I leave anyone out?
Dragon.
And a dragon. I might forget something and I'll ask again. And then object-wise, we've got a torch, we've got a panda, and what were the other things again?
Orange.
An orange, of course. Stars.
Ukulele.
And the ukulele. And finally, we need a place.
Jamaica.
Okay, 2 places.
Mississippi swamp.
Mississippi swamp.
Wow.
El Presidente extraordinaire Donald Trump had taken his best friend to the Mississippi swamp. His friend was a panda called Amanda, who had recently been exploiting resources in Uganda. Until they ran out of insurance money, they had to pull a heist. They were trying to rip off RMA, and that's how they found themselves in the swamp that day, searching for the mystical, magical owl. Trump was there with his hairpiece coming over his scowl, wiping the sweat off his brow with a towel, looking for that owl. He started to think of his dream love, Simon Cowell. So there they were, walking through the swamp. They were getting steamy, they were getting sweaty. Anne was thinking of her friend Betty that she left back in Uganda and having to pander to Trump's weird ways, but anyway, whatever pays. She started to tire of Trump's evil banter. A horse came by, moving from a walk to a gallop back to a canter. The horse said, "I'm gonna take you on the medicine trail." Trump called up Clinton, but he was too busy trying to inhale. The mystical owl flew out from behind the swamp as the sun was setting. Swamp was sitting doing a strange kind of new meditation that he called Tibeting. I won't go into the details, but as his imagination set sail into the way that only his mind could work, because, you know, he is a bit of a jerk, but anyway. Who have we left out character-wise?
Dragon, stars, orange, ukulele.
They reached the realm of the medicine land when the ukulele dragon came out and said, "Shit, I've fallen off the wagon again." He'd been studying Zen out there in the Mississippi swamp, but he had a bit of a fetish for tortures, as a matter of fact. He kept on swallowing them, trying to become enlightened. And then he developed another fetish for books by Enid Blyton, who was very politically incorrect, mainly because they were written in the 50s and they were really racist, but that's another story. The dragon started to unpeel itself like an orange. The way people allegedly did on acid trips back in the day. You've probably heard that story, but it's true. The Trump himself began to unravel. He revealed a core of solid blue. Everyone he had cheated and robbed from and exploited sat in front of him, ready to be anointed by the magic wand of the magic and life-giving owl, who wiped the dragon's brow with a towel as the dragon's armor started to uncoil. Trump's heart started to boil, overflowing with a strange kind of tarmac. It spread. Another orange started growing out of Trump's head, out of the headpiece. It spread until it was the size of a large basketball-sized planet. At which point, Amanda the panda from Uganda brought out her friend Andre Stander, who pulled out a gun, took aim at the giant orange growing out of Trump's head, took a deep breath, pumped 3 rounds of lead. The planet exploded, out of which came the all-seeing, all-knowing, one-eyed unicorn. Trump looked at him with scorn and said, "I've seen better, I've seen the best, the best, the best." But he knew he was in shit. He could not outwit the all-seeing eye of the unicorn. The next layer of Trump started to unravel, revealing sinew, revealing bone, revealing organs, revealing what had been sown for decades inside the skin of the Trump, there that day in the Mississippi swamp, as the last sliver of sunset sank behind the horizon. Trump felt remorse. He began to wisen up to things, the way the universe sings a song to you in your final moment it brings. But it was too late as his matter began to ooze. Amanda the panda from Uganda had a slight case of the blues, but wasn't too upset as the sun set. Thank you. So I thought I should have at least one story that specifically talked about or incorporated the word medicine. And this is a story that comes from the prairies of the place that is now called America. And again, I don't know exactly which people it comes from, but from that part of the world. And there's a story that is called Jumping Mouse. There once was a mouse, a small, ordinary little mouse who lived among the mouse people and did little mousy things, went around gathering up nuts and seeds and burrowing in and out of little holes in the cottonwood trees. But one day, the mouse, he heard a sound from afar. It was like a roaring in his ear. And from then on, that sound was always there. He tried to avoid it, getting back to his busy mouse things, doing what he was supposed to do. But he could not unhear that sound. And one day he turned to another mouse and he said, "My brother, do you hear that sound?" "What sound? What sound?" said the mouse, and got back to being a busy mouse. He turned to another mouse. "Do you hear that sound? Are you soft in the head?" But he kept on hearing that sound, and try as he could to forget it, he could not. And one day, it again stopped in the middle of his work, hearing that sound, when he heard a voice. "Oh, hello, little brother." "Oh, hello, Brother Raccoon." What are you doing? I'm listening to that sound, that far-off sound. Do you hear it, brother? Ah, that sound is the river. What is a river? Oh, Brother Mouse, I will take you to the river. Will you come with me? Little Mouse was terrified. He'd never left the little area where his people were, but he agreed to go. And the raccoon led him down a path. And as he went, his heart beat fast with fear. He could smell all the animals that had been there before. And the further away they got, the more afraid he became. But he did not stop. And they reached the river. It was huge. It was powerful. Great and small bits of the world floated along the river. And in the middle of the river, in a still part, there sat on a lily pad a big green frog. Raccoon said to Mouse, I must go, my brother, but I will leave you here with the frog. Brother Frog will take care of you. And off he went, looking for food to wash and eat. Are you not terrified being out there in the middle of the river? Asked the Mouse. My brother, replied the frog, I was born with the ability to live both above and below the water. In the winter, you will not find me here, for when winter comes to freeze this medicine, I will be below. But in the summer, for as long as the thunderbird flies, you will find me on my lily pad. Now tell me, little Mouse, would you like to receive some medicine power? Medicine power? For me? Yes, if that is possible. Then, my brother, crouch as low as you are able and jump as high as you can. The little Mouse did as he was told. He crouched as low as he could and he jumped as high as he could. And as he jumped up across the river, he saw a glimpse of the sacred mountains. And he came down and landed in the river. He thrashed about, he screamed, he panicked, and eventually pulled himself to the shore. You tricked me, he screamed at Frog. Why have you done this? My brother, do not be blinded by your anger, for you have been brave. And now you will receive a medicine, and from now on you shall be known as Jumping Mouse. Now you must return to your people. Jumping Mouse returned to his people and tried to tell them all about the river, but no one would listen to him. They did not understand why he was wet if it hadn't been raining. They thought that perhaps he had been picked up by an animal of prey, a bird of prey, and if the animal had not eaten him, it must be poison to them. And if it was poison to them, maybe he was poison to everybody. But the mouse carried on with his normal mouse business, but he could not forget what he'd seen, the sight of the sacred mountains. And one day he decided he needed to go. He took a deep breath and ran out onto the prairie, all the while looking up at the small dots circling in the sky, the eagles that could pounce down and eat him at any moment. And he ran from chokecherry tree to sagebush, taking shelter, ran a little bit more, until he arrived in a large bush. And there met an old fat mouse. Welcome, little brother, said the mouse. Stay with me a while. And this place was a paradise for mice. There was everything you could possibly want, every kind of nut, berry, and seed. And Jumping Mouse stayed there a few days. But then he said he was going. Don't be foolish, said the big old mouse. Everyone knows there's no such thing as the sacred mountains. You're just going to die. You're going to get eaten by an eagle. But Jumping Mouse thanked him and went on his way. And he ran from post to post until he ran into a large animal. It was a buffalo. Why, that buffalo was magnificent. It was huge. He could have fitted into one of its horns. Greetings, little brother, said the buffalo. And then the mouse saw the buffalo was ill. He was dying. What is wrong with you? I am dying, little brother, but the only thing that can save me now is the eye of a mouse, and everybody knows there's no such thing as a mouse. The little guy was terrified. He ran and hid behind a bush, his heart thumping, but then he thought, that buffalo, he is so huge, so magnificent, and I'm just a small little mouse. Surely I must help him if I can. He went back and he said, my brother, I am a mouse. I wish to help you. You may have one of his eyes. And no sooner had he spoke, one of his eyes flew from his head, and the buffalo was made whole. Why, thank you, brother mouse, said the buffalo. I can see again, I am whole. I can see your medicine from the river, and I know where you are going. I will guide you across the plains, but I can only guide you as far as the foot of the mountains, for I am of the prairie. The buffalo ran. Jumping Mouse ran under the buffalo, the ground shaking with every step, until they reached the mountain, up to then safe from the eagles. Jumping Mouse thanked the buffalo and said he had been terrified that he might have been crushed at any moment. The buffalo replied, my brother, you had no need to worry, for my walk is the way of the sun dance, and I know where every hoof falls. I must return now, so that I may guide others. And he left. Jumping Mouse foraged around for some food, and as he was foraging around, he saw another creature whom he greeted. Hello, wolf. Yes, that's me. I'm a wolf. Brother Wolf. Yes, that's me. I am a wolf. Brother Mouse thought, such a magnificent, beautiful creature, but yet he cannot remember who he is. And then he thought, there's only one way to save him. I must give him my other eye. And he spoke, Brother Wolf, Wolf, but please, brother, please listen to me. I am a mouse, and I have some medicine for you, if you will accept it. And no sooner had he spoken than his other eye flew from his head, and the wolf was made whole. The wolf, remembering who he was, wept with joy. Thank you, little brother. Thank you for your kindness, for your bravery. I am the guardian of the sacred mountains, and I shall take you up the mountains to the sacred lake in which all souls are reflected. And they walk under me, and you will be safe from the eagles. And they walked through the pine trees up the mountain until they reached the sacred lake. I can stay here for as long as you want, my brother, but soon I must leave you so that I may guide others towards the sacred lake. Jumping Mouse was terrified. He knew he was defenseless and an eagle would eat him. But he said, thank you, my brother. Thank you for your guidance. You may go. So he was there on his own, his heart beating fast, knowing that his death was imminent. And then he felt the shadow of an eagle across his back. He heard the sound that eagles make, and he felt as the eagle hit him. He went to sleep. When he awoke, he was amazed to be awake again. He could see. His vision was blurry, but the colors were beautiful. He looked down and he heard a voice. It was the voice of his friend, the magic frog. My brother, would you like some medicine? Yes, I would, if it is possible for me. Then crouch as low as you're able and jump as high as you can. And so Jumping Mouse did as he was instructed. And as he jumped, he took off into the air, further and further, trusting the wind to carry him. And the higher he got, the clearer his vision, until he looked down and he could see, sitting there in the middle of the medicine lake, his friend the frog. He trusted and surrendered to the wind, and he went higher and higher, and he looked, and before, where it had hind legs, he had talons. Where it had front legs, he had wings. And where before his twitching mouse nose and whiskers were, there was a great and powerful beak. He surrendered himself fully to the wind, he swept his wings open, and he flew. Thank you. Okay, how are we doing? Do we have time for one more story?
Yeah.
Okay. going to end with another rhyming story. I'm in a kind of rhyming mood. Can you guys handle a rhyming story? Yes. Finale. Okay. So this one, I guess, is kind of, let's see what it's about. It's an ancient Chinese tale that is called The Pear Seed. Long, long ago, many lifespans, in an ancient empire just west of Japan, there lived an old farmer, wise and weathered. He hadn't 2 coins to rub together. A famine year, the rains had not come. Rice sacks flapped empty in the scorching summer wind, and his belly beat tight and empty as a drum. Came market day, that farmer went to town to see if fate would smile and crown him king for a day, with some food to eat from a generous hand or from off the street. But the cats, the rats, the vultures had already been, the scraps all taken, the bones picked clean. The farmer let out a heavy sigh when suddenly from the corner of his eye he saw a pile of juicy pears at a stall unmanned. His belly rumbled and out crept a hand. He grabbed a pear and snatched it away. Good fortune had smiled after all that day. The farmer, he smiled too, and he licked his lips at the tasty treat in store, but in his haste he stumbled and tripped, and the pear rolled slowly across the floor. Thief! The cry went up all around. Well, 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 what have we found? Said the policeman, pinning the farmer to the ground. Now, as fate would have it, the emperor and his ministers were visiting that very town that same day. They decided to make an example of that thief, the might and power of their good and just laws to display. By the emperor himself, the farmer was sentenced to die. But summoning up his last wit, his last strength, the farmer did cry, "Spare my life! I'll do you a good turn. Please loosen these ropes, for my wrists, they burn." By the emperor's mercy, the ropes were undone. The farmer bowed. "Thank you, great mighty one." Then, bony fingers from a ragged pocket pulled out a tiny pear seed. The farmer spoke, through this shall grow my good deed. For you plant this seed deep in the ground, and you will have a tree that grows overnight and gives golden fruit all the year round. For the seed is indeed a magical seed. It can only be planted by one free of greed. Yes, by a man who has never strayed away from his word and has always remained true to his word with every deed. Only such a man can plant this seed. The farmer looked into the emperor's eyes. "Great leader, mighty and wise, it is surely your hands that can plant this seed, that it may grow to a mighty tree." A stony silence eventually broke. Stiff and solemn, the emperor spoke. "The work of a farmer does not befit he who upon the great throne does sit. Instead, a foreign minister will no doubt be glad, returned afresh from affairs in Baghdad." But the foreign minister, eyes averted, round the issue diplomatically skirted. For as the great hand of fate upon his clock almost struck, he spied his escape, a moment of luck. For there in the room, beady-eyed, shoulders hunched up like a vulture, he spotted the Minister of Agriculture. "Why, there's the man for the job," Foreign Minister spoke. For my skills with seeds are beyond a joke. I'm absolutely useless. Just ask my wife, I couldn't give even a magic seed life." Agriculture Minister, he was clearly shaken. I believe you must be mistaken. See my shoulders, my wrists, so weakly made. I could barely even lift a spade." Farmer stood tall in his scrawny frame. All of us who point fingers of blame will see how more point back when we do, for who among us was always true? Here we stand levelled. Ask yourselves, Is it fair to take my life for stealing a little pear? These seeds inside our heart, these too bear fruit. So let's tend the soil in which our own trees take root. It matters not in which role we are groomed if the flower of forgiveness within is not bloomed. Great, thank you so much everyone for coming tonight. Thanks to Romy and the plant people for organising tonight. There's like, for me, it's kind of coming back to what I love doing. So this night meant really a lot to me, and so thank you all for being a part of it. And if anyone is interested in, I have some CDs for sale. They are 150 rand. Cool, thank you.
Thank you.